I've never done any wallpapering before. I spent the last 20 years trying to get rid of the dreadful stuff, particularly this wood chip, in the 2 Victorian properties I've lived in. But back in February, my daughter asked me for her birthday if I'd wallpaper this wall behind me. In this extra wide width wallpaper, and yes, the poor thing, it has literally taken me this long to get around to doing it. Now, I couldn't find any videos on YouTube showing me how to wallpaper around tricky shapes like this window, and so I thought I'd do a video today talking you through my experiences, what I've learned by trial and error, and the mistakes I've made. And believe you me, there's one massive mistake. I want you to realise that wallpapering is actually a lot easier than you thought, certainly not something to be feared, and you wouldn't believe this, but I've actually become a bit of a convert. So let's have a look at today's toolkit. I've got this Alpha cutter, brilliant because you can snap the blades to keep it sharp. I've used all of them on this job. Perfect tip scissors from Axis Decor, wallpaper press, wallpaper smoother and wallpaper brush. Special thanks to Richard at Prestige Decorating Supplies on eBay for supplying me with this Axis Decor kit. And then from Brewers I bought these Coral Paper Whiz 3-in-1 smoothing, seaming and trimming tools, 2.5 kilogram yellow and red top ready mix standard wall coverings adhesive, Pro Deck 24-inch trimming and smoothing edge, lining paper, masking tape. I bought these sugar wipes from Screwfix, and I already had this Worcester paint scuttle, I love this paint scuttle, and roller and paintbrush. Oh, and also this Werner professional work platform bought through WeShop from Wix in the summer. You get shares every time you buy with WeShop. I'll put instructions on how you sign up in the description. And I couldn't have managed without my head torch. If you haven't got one of these, you must get one. 1 or 2 of these do the same job, but I thought I'd experiment to see which I preferred. Details of all the tools will, as usual, be in the description below the vid. So, in terms of planning the job, Lewis & Wood, who I bought the paper from, have a set of instructions on their website. They also have an instructional video, and so these 2 reference tools gave me a game plan for the job. The instructions I received recommended lining the wall first, but as this was a newly insulated plastered wall I installed a few years ago and fairly recently repainted, I decided this wasn't necessary. For a pattern paper like this, you cut identical drops for the alternate or odd numbered drops, so drops 1 and 3 in my scenario, as there are only 3 drops across the wall. And then for the even drops, to match the pattern on the right edge of drop 1 with the left edge of drop 2 and so on, you have to move the drop to the next repeat, as you can see me doing here, in my wife's office, as there wasn't enough space at home in the cottage. With paper this width, it's easier to work on a floor rather than using a table as you would with standard width roll. And I'm improvising a straight edge here with some big dug racking. And that leaves you with this small amount of wastage on the even drops. Problem was, the wall in the video was a simple one, and as try as I might, I couldn't find a video to show me how to cut the wallpaper around window sills or boards, as they seem to concentrate on folding the paper into the reveal rather than round the sill. Pro decorators would point out you simply cut round in situ with the wallpaper hanging off the wall, but as a newbie to this art, I thought there had to be an easier way that minimised any errors, and so I set about creating a template of the wall out of lining paper. The left-hand wall is perfectly plumb, as I installed insulated plasterboard several years ago, and so I thought if I created a perfect cutout in the template, I could translate that onto the first drop of wallpaper. This did a couple of things. It gave me a bit of practice in the art of cutting around the windowsills and with my new trimming tools, and showed me the points at which I was likely to mess up. So, having created the template, I set about transferring this to the first drop. And then disaster struck. Having cut out the window shape, I suddenly realised I'd cut it out with a wallpaper upside down. The paper is printed to order, and at £45 a metre I had neither the time or budget to replace it, so I had no option but to recut the template the right way up on drop 3 and try and patch drop 1 together as a new drop 3 later on. And so it was time to start gluing the wallpaper to the wall. Remember, with this paper you apply the adhesive to the wall, not the paper. And so I set about marking the join of each piece on the wall, and I used my brilliant DIYte laser level as a guide, but a spirit level would do the job fine. That's the line of the wallpaper finish. This is where I'm pasting up to. I thought I'd leave this gap so that adhesive wouldn't get on the overlaps that I'd be razor blading away later. Just remember, if you number your drops or draw a dividing line on the wall in between each drop, make sure it's faint, as pencil can show through the wallpaper if it's a light background colour. So these are the adhesives I decided to use. I think they're Brewers' own brands. Yellow top standard adhesive for the majority of the wall, and this extra strong red top for going around the edges. And I decided to also use it around the window architraves and sills. It's much thicker than I thought it would be. I actually used a spoon to ladle it into the scuttle, and actually quite hard to apply with a paintbrush. It was getting late in the day, so my head torch was critical in ensuring I didn't miss any bits, but it's obviously not so great from a filming point of view. I was using this Purdy White Dove All Paints roller sleeve. Obviously you'd want a 9-inch roller for larger areas or to work quicker, but the trick seemed to be to apply a generous but even layer of paste to the wall. And so it was time to hang the first drop, which I templated, allowing for a 15 to 20mm overlap onto the ceiling, sidewalls and skirting. I'll come on to whether it was worth templating in a minute, but having gone to the effort of doing it, it made hanging the first drop around the windowsill effortless. After carefully pressing the paper into place around the window, I used my Access Decor wallpaper smoother to smooth down the paper and eliminate any air pockets. I then reached for the Coral Paper Whiz and used this to press the wallpaper into the corners and then to trim off the excess. In all honesty, if you buy one of these, you won't need the Access Decor smoother, as it's a 3-in-1 tool that smooths, seams and trims, and the Paper Whiz made trimming the excess along the wall and ceiling lines. I thought I'd apply a bit of extra paste here as it was a while since I'd done it, and also along the skirting board, absolutely effortless. And I've got to say the Paper Whiz was so good I completely forgot to try out the internal corner tool on the Access Decor wallpaper press, which again you can probably do without. I decided quite early on I was going to paper around the right side of the window the proper way rather than relying on that lining paper template. Partly because, well, this is a YouTube vid, so I want to show different approaches, but also because I would have had to match up the 2 drops before templating the second drop, which I didn't do. But the templating had been useful in showing me how to cut around an architrave and windowsill. So, armed with that experience, I set about hanging the second drop from the top, overlapping the edges and matching the pattern as accurately as I could, before then smoothing down the rest of the drop to bond it to the wall. As you see, there's quite a lot of realigning going on here, but I want to show you the process without too much speeding up so you can see how I grappled with pattern matching and hanging my first full width piece of wallpaper. After making an indent of the architrave in the paper, I cut through it with my Alpha knife in the knowledge that I was cutting it with a little overlap built in that I could remove shortly with the Coral Paper Whiz. At this point, as you can see here, I cut on the wrong side of the Paper Whiz, this being more instinctive to a right-hander, although I just about got away with this. And then as I gradually cut the paper around the sill, to remove a flap that was getting in the way, I stupidly sliced off too much of the paper. More on that in a minute, but other than that, with the help of the Paper Whiz and a pair of scissors, I did a half decent, if not perfect, job of cutting round the sill. I had a couple more jobs to do on this drop. Firstly, to trim the wallpaper flush to the ceiling using my now invaluable Paper Whiz, and then with this done, to razor blade down the centre of the overlap using a metal ruler, removing the excess and then paste under the join and smooth it down. I was pretty pleased with the end result. Down at the bottom of the drop, to razor blade away the overlapping fabric, I used a 24-inch trimming and smoothing edge I bought from Brewers. Decorators will probably say this is too long, particularly if you've got undulating walls. And Lewis & Wood's decorator used a much shorter metal edge, but it worked well on my flat walls. If I'm honest, I didn't get the pattern to match up completely at the bottom. It was a couple of millimetres out, as the most minute mismatch at the top and a window to cut around makes this quite tricky to get spot on. The other thing I had to do is glue back on that piece I have stupidly cut off, which again I used the Paper Whiz to trim below the sill. Again, razor blading off the overlap with the trimming edge. And I was on to the final drop, heart in my mouth, knowing that I was going to have to fudge something after that first drop I'd cut the template out of the wrong way up. In a sense, this helped me because I had a much shorter piece of wallpaper to grapple with, as I pattern matched it up with drop 2, trimmed it to the ceiling and sloping wall with my Paper Whiz, and then carefully cut out the profile of the architrave, much as I'd done around the window. One thing I would say is you can be reasonably rough with this paper when compared, say, with that lining paper. Remember how it tore around the sill. This paper being fibre reinforced. A little more adhesive in the corner and I can press the paper into place and carry out the final trim with the Paper Whiz. I also had a little play with the smoothing brush I showed you earlier, but again I don't think this is really necessary if you've got that 3-in-1 Paper Whiz. And now I was well and truly into Botchville, but armed with my new skills, having to join back together the first piece I'd cut off for the window, but as it was a clean razor cut, the two pieces went back together so well the join is pretty much invisible. And here's how I cut around the plug sockets and light switches, laying the paper on top, feeling for the edge of the socket, and then cutting out with a razor blade. And then to the final piece, which neatly shows the whole process in a small area, from the initial pasting of the wall, matching of the pattern, and I even had a little play with that Access Decor seam smoother. More obvious than the join above, if I'm honest, but you'd have to really look to find it. To trimming around the plug socket and trimming flush with the architrave and skirting board using the brilliant Paper Whiz tool. One final join to cut down with my trimming edge. I realised during the process I didn't quite press hard enough to cut through both pieces of paper, or maybe the blade needed snapping off again. A final application with the paste and the wallpapering was finished. This is the French pleat, which fixtures the headboard to the wall. I'll hopefully be doing a video soon showing you how I made the headboard and all the other steps I took to update the decor in my daughter's room. And the final step, fixing that screwless light switch back in place. So clearly there are a few mistakes on this project. I was really keen to leave them in though, because let's face it, this is the first time I've undertaken something like this, and by showing you all the mistakes it will be hopefully a little bit less intimidating for you if you're undertaking something similar. But all in all, I'm pretty pleased with the result, and any decorators out there, if you've got anything to add, it would be great to hear from you in the comments section below. With the benefit of hindsight, I wouldn't have bothered using that lining paper template, but I was just a little bit scared, having not done this before, as to what would happen if I went straight out there with the first piece of wallpaper. The irony is, in using that lining template, I actually ruined the first drop anyway, so I probably would have been better just getting on with it. But it is worth remembering it did give me a great opportunity to practice before using the real thing. Tools wise, you're probably sick of me talking about that Paper Whiz. I did actually buy the extra long XL Paper Whiz too, because it was just £4.96. So I thought it'd be useful to experiment with it, and I used it on the first drop. But in my experience on this job, you don't actually need that longer Paper Whiz, particularly if you're working with irregular surfaces. The shorter length will be more than adequate. I'll put a full breakdown of the prices on my Patreon page. Don't forget, for a small monthly fee, you get access to my Discord chat forum where you can chat to me and all the other members on a daily basis about all your DIY conundrums. And as I said, links to all the tools I've used today will be in the description below the video, which you can access on your smartphone by clicking on the More link and on your PC by clicking on the Show More button. That's it for today. Thanks for watching this video, and if you're new to my channel, it means so much to me to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here, and don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you get notified of all my future uploads. See you soon.